You know, we got to check in on Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom's reaction to the Vice President Kamala Harris debate with former disgraced President Donald Trump. I should say disgraced former president. I guess that's more accurate. And he got even more disgraced at this debate, as we've been talking about. I'll try not to rehash it all, but put simply, if you're just stumbling across the segment, you haven't seen my past coverage, it went well for Kamala Harris, went poorly for Donald Trump. And Newsom really did some tap dancing on the grave during his appearance on MSNBC.
He was just here, spinning his spin. Yep. What do you think that represents in terms of his assessment of
an act of desperation. He knows he got his clock clean. From the moment she came out on stage, when she introduced himself, she had the courage to go over to him, shake his hand, clearly was uncomfortable, and introduced herself as Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. She commanded the room from the second she came out. She was a commander-in-chief, and she had him on the defense the entire night. If this was a prize fight, it would have been TKO in the second round. She did as well or better than any of us could have hoped for, and I know her well enough to know this: the best is yet to come. She can do that even more. With more experience, more time on the campaign trail, you're going to see the quality of her performance only improve.
That's an interesting point, too. Yeah, because I was thinking, again, the only criticism that has made any sense, not really criticism, is it the only thing I've seen that there's actually some basis of truth to was the beginning was slightly shaky, right? A little bit, it felt a little nervous, and wasn't delivered as confidently as most of the rest of the debate. That probably doesn't happen in a future one, especially now that she knows how well it can go. And so to think it could have gone this well, and if a second one happens, that could go even better, is pretty exciting. My question is, would Trump do that to himself? He's laying the groundwork now with every network, unless Hannity hosts it, it's all fake. It's all, sort of rigged against me. The moderators are so biased. And he's saying this was his best debate performance ever, which is the saddest crumbling man sort of thing to say ever. And then he's saying she only wants to do it because it went so bad for her. So I can see him actually saying, I'm not going through that again. The weird thing is, obviously, a part of why the general perception, even in some right-wing media, is, wow, this was Harris's night. We can acknowledge it's partly just because Biden's problem was not that on the substance he was wrong or didn't have correct points, but he just couldn't deliver it in a way that made sense to people and was compelling, especially at that debate. And that now being flipped out with someone who very similar record, she's part of the administration, a lot of similar proposals, but can just deliver the facts of this election. Not how stylistically or how many cool talking points can be come up with, just basically explaining what the facts are of this contrast of the two records and the two visions. That by itself is a Harris win. And so then you add on top of that the stylistic stuff also came out really well, and the sound bites came out really well. And I don't know how Trump sees that and thinks he could really change something properly. Well, he'll think he can because he thinks this went amazing for him. But I don't know how his team would encourage him to do that. Here's more.
Debate, because I think belatedly we're having this national conversation about sane washing Donald Trump. The fact that this man has been rambling incoherently, irresponsibly for months, if not years, but it's been especially acute in recent weeks. And I think we're finally having this dialogue about how do you not normalize or how do you not trend towards coherence when you're talking about what Trump just said? How do you accurately sort of explain to the American public the mendacity, the incoherence, the irresponsibility, the aggression in a way that accurately reflects the tone and tenor of a person that is increasingly unhinged?
He's not only unhinged, but he's derivative of himself. I find him incredibly...
Wait, what does that mean, derivative of himself?
He's boring. And this, I may get in trouble, particularly with this audience. 5 or 6 years ago, you'd tune in, maybe for the train wreck, the clown show, but there was some entertainment value. I mean, you've been watching some of his speeches. It's monotone. He's boring across the board. Even in his audiences, you see people paying attention not to the speech, to themselves, walking out early.
Looking at their clocks.
He's lost a step. And what happened, look, what I think will happen tonight, I expect, if she's successful, he'll start off that old Trump, perhaps in that last debate, and try to be the new Trump. Again, he's the one guy universally graded on the curve. He's, in his little pity party, he's the victim. He's always been the victim. But there'll be a point where he gets off his game. These are 2 minutes. That's a long period of time. 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
So I guess this part was actually even before the debate started, and he could not have predicted that better. But I'm so glad. It's so relieving. How long have we been screaming about that double standard? And how when Trump is asked, what's your plan on childcare? And goes, well, the numbers show that the numbers that we're going to do about the numbers, it will really yield and great. And I should stay on childcare. And since childcare is the thing people are concerned with, we have a plan relation into up around the numbers, which are bigger than the likes of which has ever done. So make America great again. Woo! When he does that, most people, you do, because you're a freak like me, but most people aren't actually watching all that type of coverage to see the full answer. And then the reporting about it is Trump asked about childcare. In jumbled answer, expresses his priority to implement legislation on that at the beginning of his administration, but sees tariffs as a way to bring in an influx of money to fund programs like childcare or whatever. And you see it and you're thinking that's the sane washing term. I want to give credit. I think Aaron Rupar is really the person who started that, and now it's everywhere. That's what we're talking about, because then you see Trump, maybe an occasional clip of him delivering a speech, and you feel like you know him, and then you hear reporting, and it abstracts what is a very diminished man. And so the fact that finally that's being talked about is great. And again, we go back to Trump gives that answer, and finally now people have talked about it a good bit. But the point I've heard a lot of people make is if Biden gave that answer, and he's given some bad answers, but that type of, if 2 minutes of Biden unraveling like Trump did that answer and just saying a lot and nothing, of course Fox News would talk about it. You'd have mainstream media story about it. As we saw, there would be the drop off the ticket conversation. And both MAGA media, but then also mainstream media doesn't apply a similar standard to Trump whenever he goes off the rails. And so that was a tougher conversation to have when Biden, especially in the way that his aging is showing, it's different, and it caused more concern. Even polling showed this. There's a lot of concern about Trump too, but more for Biden, polling reveals. So did it politically work too well to accurately point out Trump's mental decline? Now that even on that debate stage, you could feel that split screen, especially when it actually happened, and Harris is on one side, Trump's on the other. Trump's talking about dogs and cats being eaten by, the fairy tale in his head of a migrant, and Harris is actually calmly and thoughtfully articulating her policy vision. It makes it way more politically relevant, and that's why we're finally seeing mainstream media focus more on it, to talk about his age and his decline and his incoherence. And we have to make sure we hold outlets accountable and request them and call attention to the, it's not bad faith, but it's just an instinct we have to sane wash, because sometimes, as I've now acknowledged a few times throughout this show, accurately assessing such a dramatic contrast can make you seem wildly biased, right? But when that's the reality, you have an obligation as a media outlet or a pundit to assess it as such. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Support the show by clicking the join button below. Donate, as Cole is barely able to hold in his sneezes as we wrap up our last segment of the day. You can donate to the Kamala Harris campaign by clicking the link in the description of this video.